which for me is the ultimate irony, considering that AI from its core is built off of other people's IP and it's trained off of everyone else's IP.
Yeah.
And yet then they have the temerity to complain that somebody is trying to steal their IP using the same type of tool that they use. And it's just the hypocrisy of it absolutely just drives me wild.
Well, good morning and welcome to AI Evolution Podcast. We have an unusual episode today actually because I have Ben and Dave.
Hello.
We're in the same room. Look, there we are. We can actually reach out and touch
First
each other.
time. I know.
It's amazing.
We're not staring at different screens, but there we are. So we are literally going to have, as you can see, a fireside chat this morning. And I think we're going to keep it sort of fairly loose because it's not often we get together like this. So this is a good opportunity just to kind of have more of a free-form approach to the podcast. So we haven't got a specific topic this week, but we are going to talk about a range of different things that we've seen that have been going on in the AI space over the past few weeks and have a bit of a fireside chat about those.
Sounds good.
Dave, do you want to kick off this time? I think you've got something you want to talk about.
Yeah, sure. So in the last couple of weeks, I've noticed some articles coming out where I think it was Anthropic was complaining bitterly that other AI companies have been using their AI tools to essentially attack their system to learn how all of their algorithms work so that they can then take that IP and to make the other AIs work better, which for me is the ultimate irony, considering that AI from its core is built off of other people's IP and it's trained off of everyone else's IP.
Yeah.
And yet then they have the temerity to complain that somebody is trying to steal their IP using the same type of tool that they use. And it's just the hypocrisy of it absolutely just drives me wild. And this is, it is where everything is going, right? And we talked about this a little bit, and I don't know if we want to expand this whole conversation into the death of IP, but I do find the whole situation quite comical in one way if it wasn't so annoying in another. Because for me personally, hypocrites are the things that I can't stand the most.
Yeah.
Right? I'm quite happy if anybody wants to do anything they want to do, right? Other than like killing someone, pretty much whatever you want to do. If you're not harming anyone else, do whatever you want to do.
Yeah.
Just don't criticize other people for it, right? Like you just own it. If that's your thing, then do your thing. And you know, you have to be okay with that for me. And so the whole hypocrisy of it, I think is
I think especially as you think some of these companies are trained their data on illegal torrents of scientific papers, music, films, and and there's going to be big lawsuits around that. I mean, the hypocrisy is off the scale, really.
Yeah.
It is ironic, very ironic.
It's very funny. I mean, when you think, as you say, the scale of the sort of copying that's gone on, and I think they've always worked on the basis, these companies, that, we'll just do it and then see if we get sued, rather than actually sort of start with an ethical principle and think, is this actually the right thing to do? I remember seeing I think she was CEO at the time of OpenAI a while ago, and she was being interviewed, and she was sort of saying, they asked her directly, have you trained on YouTube? And she just would skirt around it. She wouldn't say no, obviously, because, because they had, probably, allegedly.
Yeah.
But, at the same time, it was kind of like, well, but you just know that OpenAI or Anthropic, whoever it's going to be, the moment there's something against them, they're going to be the first to complain bitterly about this. Well, they're using our systems, or they're using our ideas, or they've stolen this. But I think we see this all the time, don't we? In life in general. Anyway, I mean, we were talking about this last night a bit, and I said that, but the Radiohead example, where Radiohead are a band you would consider to be sort of, I guess, ethical, right? They sort of they would have principles, you would think, and all that, based on the way they write their songs and stuff. And they'd obviously copied the Hollies song "Air That You Breathe" when they made "Creep," whether they did that knowingly, but certainly. The Hollies got credited for the Creep song eventually, and are on the writing credits, And then, a few years ago, Lana Del Rey does a song which sounds uncannily like Creep, and they sue her. And you sort of think, well, hang on a minute, like can you not see the irony here? But no, it's like that to them would seem to be the perfectly normal thing to do. And when you sort of think, well, maybe it isn't. So I don't know. I think it's human nature a little bit. And, you hear the stories about how these, LLMs were built and all the books that were scraped. And, the internet, I suppose, is one thing, right? Because that's stuff that's out there to some degree that people have put out there. But Reddit and those sort of threads. But when you're actually, I think it was Meta said, they sort of bought all these illegal books, right? So they hadn't gone and bought the books that were legally available and then scraped them.
Right.
They'd actually found a sort of library of illegal books where all this stuff was being stored and no one had paid any copyright or anything, and scraped that instead. It's kind of
And you think of the volume of cash that's gone into these things, actually paying someone for copyright for some of these things would have been the ethical starting point. And doing it correctly. And we've often pointed these things out over the last 18 months as we've been talking about this. But yeah, I mean, the irony and the hypocrisy of that is off the scale, isn't it?
I think two points. Number one is when the very original model, I mean, they've been doing these models in labs in universities for decades, right? Like, it's only, ChatGPT burst onto the scene because they released it to the public because it was far enough along that they thought it might be useful, right? But they've been building these models for ages. And when you think about it within the university context and somebody in a computer science department is doing research, they have access to all of those academic texts. And so they're just doing research. And it isn't for money, it's for educational purposes and whatever. So nobody really minded. And so, when the models very first came out, if you remember, everything sounded extremely academic because that's the only thing they'd ever been trained on were academic texts.
And apparently that's where we get the long dash from.
Exactly, and that's where the M-dash came from because M-dash is correct grammar and was used correctly from scientific papers and things. So, there was that bit in the beginning, but the other side of it was that it also wasn't being done for profit. And that was the whole kind of thing as well, right? Is that the whole idea behind it was that it was just research. And as soon as you sort of explode onto the scene and you start doing that, then, that was the whole idea. The whole thing was a non-profit. And I mean, everybody knew as soon as it went out that there was no way that was going to, it was going to make it as a non-profit. Now, again, we've talked ultimately about what's the ultimate end game in all of this. If we reach a point where we have quantum and we have fusion, the processing cost of that goes to almost zero. So at that point, does it then become just a free resource that everyone has access to because it doesn't really cost anything to run it? And no one's working, like, it's going to be a totally different world when all that stuff happens. But until then, it's got to be a money-making thing. And if people are making money off of it, then they do need to pay someone.
It's interesting, the money-making thing actually at the moment, because we're sort of seeing a bit of a fork, aren't we, between, say, OpenAI and Anthropic. You've got Anthropic on one hand, who are sort of openly saying, we will never run ads, and actually making their own adverts to poke fun at OpenAI, who are...
I think we'll talk about
who are in certain ads. So, but you have this sort of thing, don't you, where at some point you've got to make money out of it, like you say, and they're spending enormous amounts of money to change these models, and they're going to have to. They're in an arms race as well, so it's not like we can just kind of get this model done and then that's it. It's it's like Formula One. Next season you need a new car, right? So you've got to keep this kind of cycle going, and so I think how then you can see how OpenAI might make some money because obviously they're going to go down the advert route. People will choose whether that bothers them or not. They'll self-elect, and that business model will either work or it won't. They haven't got much else. They have no hardware. They have no other kind of thing. Google, Apple, Amazon have other plays, don't they? They have other incomes, other revenue streams. So they can to some degree afford to. They're not a lost leader, but they can subsidize it to some extent. I mean, Anthropic, I put in the same kind of boat as OpenAI financially at the moment. Although they are backed by Amazon, so they do have deep backers. Yeah. But the reality is that at the moment their only potential source of income will be through the AI systems that they're building, and they've already said out the gate we're not we're not going to run ads. So what's your choice then? You end up with a world where, okay, we're going to have to at some point pay the real cost to Anthropic, which means my subscription is going to be £200 a month, or it's going to be quite high, or I'm going to OpenAI and I can still get it for £20 a month, and I'm going to have access, but I'm going to have adverts pushed at me, and I'm just going to live with that basically. So it's going to be interesting to see how this all sort of plays out. And what we've always seen with other platforms like social media and other things, eventually is what they call the enshittification, isn't it, of platforms and processes. And I think that's where we will eventually end up. And then when you enter the world where advertising exists, does that break your trust with something like a large language model? Because if you're asking it a question and you're saying, I want to know the best kind of 5 trainers that are available on the market, and it comes back with Nike, that's the one you need, are you then sitting there scratching your head thinking, I wonder if Nike sponsor OpenAI?
But don't you feel that already with search results quite often?
Yeah, well, but obviously in a search result, it's clearly labelled as ads, isn't it? Although I say clearly, not always so clearly, actually. But
I think that some of that happens to a degree already.
But do you think you could have a situation with OpenAI where, they're clearly labelling what the ads are. You go in and at the bottom there's an advert for something, okay? But then it's also in the back of your mind thinking, actually, if Nike are paying this company some money, would it, unbeknownst to everyone, just be prioritised in their response? Could I really?
You can't help having that feeling.
Well, you would think that, wouldn't you? I would be sort of, is the recommendation it's making, which is sort of on the surface, independent, actually? Yeah.
So we're going to get back to what my second point was, which I've talked about in almost every time we talk about this, which is it's no different than a human. Yeah. That's exactly how a human would be. If a human is sponsored by Nike, doctors sell medicines because they get a kickback or whatever, but it doesn't even have to be that direct. And the thing is we have everybody complains like, oh, we don't know what the AI is thinking. We don't know how it came up with this. You don't know what a human is thinking either. And there's no way a human could tell you, I have no way of explaining to you how I reach a certain point, a decision and a thought that I have. It's based on the sum total of everything that's happened to me in my life so far, and my brain comes up with a funny connection and it spits it out. Now, sometimes that's going to be because I read a book and I'm just regurgitating what I learned in that book. Yeah. Now, am I stealing someone's copyright because I've regurgitated their idea?
Yeah,
no,
sometimes we think we have an original idea. Yeah, sometimes like the music writing, you sometimes think you have an original idea, but you've absorbed that culturally for decades.
Yeah. There's 3 chords. Yeah. Right? You write a 3-chord song.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? It's like every other 3-chord song. Yeah. Right? And there's so many examples online where the guy's playing the same 3-chord chord progression and singing 40 different songs. Yeah. So you can't go, oh, well, that's my song. Do you know what I mean? Because there are a limited number of options.
So I thought that I've been thinking about for a little while. Then is that so when all this started, the reaction from a lot of publishers and artists and individuals is, how dare you scrape my data? How dare you train on my data? That's not acceptable. You should be paying me something if you're going to do that. But is there a point at which it sort of switches in the sense that actually people want to be scraped, because if they're not, they cease to become relevant. Correct. And the example I would give for this would be, I think it was maybe the Beatles and the Rolling Stones and a few other big rock bands over the years. Initially, when things like Spotify and stuff came on, they held back on it. They said, we're not going on that because our music is, of the highest order, and people should have value for that, and they should buy our records and CDs and pay money for it, or at least pay downloading fees, for an MP3 on Apple Music or whatever, or iTunes as it was then. But at some point, someone's obviously pointed out to them, do you know what? If you're not on these platforms, the generation of people coming through simply will never hear your music, and you will just become irrelevant.
You won't sell anything anyway.
And you'll never sell anything either anyway, and you'll just fade away into obscurity. And I think that there's a point where large language models will become so prevalent in our society, and traditional search goes away. I mean, you think how companies spend all their time doing SEO because they want to be found, right? Yeah. But if you don't allow yourself to be scraped and have all your stuff, you're never going to be found in an LLM, right? So maybe there's just an arc here that in the beginning everyone's worked up about it, and maybe this is what the long play for the large language model companies well, you know what? Eventually, everyone's going to want us to scrape them because they want to be in our system because we're going to be the thing. You know?
Well, it's the Google thread, isn't it?
Yeah, I
Like,
think
we'll
the big
take you off
thing.
Google.
Yeah, I think the big thing that'll change that is the more we start to use voice and less screen as well. Because you're driving along, you say, when I come home tonight, I want to have pizzas delivered. You're not searching. You're just saying to your large language model of choice, but can you send me these pizzas by whatever time?
Yeah.
And I think that's when that voice takes off for a bigger and wider adoption. That's where you want to be on all the LLMs, and your businesses want to be on there, and you're sort of interacting on a more of a voice. Of course, screen's not going to go away, but it's for me, I'm quite excited about that because one, the speed of it. Two, I love processing out loud through voice with LLMs while I'm driving or thinking of ideas, and I think that will really transform things.
Yeah.
I think that people want to be found everywhere.
Yeah, and there's a guy, and I think I talked about this once before, but there's a guy I know who runs, he does plumbing and gas and all that sort of stuff, and he's got like 8 different companies that he actually runs, but he pays for the £200 a month version, and he talks to it, and he goes on a job, and then he gets in his truck, and he says, here are the notes from this job, so he connects those notes to that client, and then he's got some behind the scenes stuff that basically will go and then pick that up. It will add it into his notes, into the client, into his like CRM tool that he's got. So all of that basically kicks off the whole workflow that goes in the background. But he can also say, how are the other projects going? And it will give him a report on all of the other projects that all of his other team are doing, because they get in and they do their reports just verbally in the truck while they're driving to the next one. And so it will say, oh, everything's been on schedule, on time, except, Joe had some trouble with this and he had to order a part. And blah, blah, and it just gives him a summary of everything audibly while he's driving, and and he can interact with it and do everything, and it's amazing. He's like, I absolutely could not run my business.
And will the contractors do voice notes as well?
Yeah, they do. Yeah.
So that it's all.
Everybody that
everyone,
works, they all do the voice notes. Yeah. And the system runs everything.
What an efficient way to sort of process your business.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Well, and I think that's sort of when the OpenClaw thing came out, and obviously that comes with a lot of risks at the moment, and we wouldn't encourage anyone to deploy that unless they really know what they're doing. But at this point, it does sort of shine a light though on maybe what the future looks like. And I think one of the really interesting things that didn't get nearly as much publicity as OpenClaw, but when Opus 4.6 came out, the sort of upgrade to the agent capability there is actually amazing. I mean, okay, yes, it's not running a heartbeat in the same way that OpenClaw is, so it doesn't wake up in the middle of the night and go, well, I'll go and do this. But it's still, it still has to be triggered by the human. But actually, it's sort of team swarm agent capability where, you give it a task, and then the lead agent, if you like, breaks that task down into a number of chunks, gives it to other agents. Basically, they all start working on different chunks of the task or the activity independently, and then they're all connected together, and they're all sort of cross-feeding to each other and sharing information. And so you're doing that. Well, that means I probably need to do this a bit more then, or and so it's being orchestrated basically, I think, through Git in a lot of instances, and then essentially, it's sort of all coming back together, and it's all happening in parallel. So it's speeding up this kind of. It's not this kind of chained process anymore. It's very much, a team thing. Your level of capability and outputs and what it can produce, for someone like your mate, it's just then escalating and going through the roof all the time. And this is a new system in the last few weeks, Opus 4.6. To some extent, you see something similar happening in OpenAI's Codex, and we're going to see, this thing, I think, over the rest of this year, just really accelerate. And by the end of this year, I think, at the moment, agents still require a little bit of understanding and knowledge from the user to really get the most out of them. But again, I think that melts away a little bit. I think in the end, we'll be back to the simple text box input for most people. So the everyday user, the non-technical user would just jump in, start having a conversation, and the agent itself will work with the user to make sure that they get what they need to do the job, and off it goes. And I think when we start to get that sort of level, and it starts to get embedded into, a bit like then the Clawbot thing, you start embedding it into the actual device ecosystem. So maybe it's like Siri, right? And it won't be Siri as it is now, but a version of Siri in the future that has that real capability, lives, inside your platform on your computer, it has that connection to all of your tools and API keys and subscriptions and everything, and suddenly has real capability and autonomy, then you really do have something very interesting. And I think maybe a year ago everyone banged on about AGI the whole time. This is the thing that gets us to this brave new world. I think actually well deployed agents that are fully connected will be so transformative that it will almost feel like that.
Yeah, they don't need to be AGI if they're useful.
And you
They're
probably don't
providing
want them to be, to be honest.
Exactly. I've become obsessed by codecs.
Yeah.
I've done three developments in the last week, and I tell you, I know Claude on benchmarks is much better, but I just run out of credits all the time. So whereas I don't on OpenAI, I just on the lower model, I've made 3 amazing, and it asks you what it can access, so it's not just got unfettered access to your computer. It doesn't just go away and do. It's constantly sort of this feedback loop. Do you want me to give? Do you give me permission to do this, this, and this? And yes. Okay. And so I've become really. I think it's an absolute.
Well, I'm obsessed with the R1, and for the same reason. And it's the reason is, the R1 has been a bit sort of standing joke, hasn't it, in the AI community since it was launched, really. It's actually really interesting now because it's running Opus 4.6. Yeah. It's running Claude 4.6.
Without credits.
Right, without credits. And you plug it into your computer via a cable, it becomes a DLAN, right, direct large action model. It can see everything in your computer. It can go in. You just tell it what you want it to do. It can be your tech support. It can install software for you. It can.
So who's paying for those?
Right, software. Rabbit.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, good on them. They've just got another round of funding apparently, so I'm happy. And this thing will just jump around your computer. When they first launched DLAN about a month ago, it had a 1 hour limit. Right. They've lifted that now. It will just run for as long as you need it to. Right. And it will do and build. And the point here is that you're using Opus 4.6, right? That's what's happening. You've basically connected Anthropic's Opus 4.6 via this device to your computer.
So it'll pay for itself every year.
It's like 150 quid for a round, right?
Okay.
So this thing is connected to your system, and it's running, and it's able to do anything that you've basically opened up allowed access to on your computer, And I had it doing tech support for my wife the other day. We had an issue with a computer. We couldn't solve the problem. And so I plugged it in and explained what the problem was. Within 10 minutes, it had it sorted, and it was like, fantastic,
Amazing.
So it's, and look, the solution in the end probably isn't plugging something in to do that. Yeah. It's just having the system already on board, right? It's Siri or it's whatever it is.
But that's step one.
But this is, if you want a proof of concept, right? That this little thing right there is doing it,
Well, it's interesting because going back to the how do you pay for this thing, sort of my idea that I had when you were talking about that earlier was that I think what we're going to end up is we'll end up with 2 different system types. You'll end up with your enterprise AI, right, which is designed for business. They're not selling it to the general public. A normal person wouldn't have access to the tool, but it would be £1,000 a month, £2,000 a month, but it would also have a lot of other protections in it as well. Yeah. So they'd have a lot of stuff about maybe not using your content to build models and all, and I know in some of the tools now that's the way it is, right? If you're using the API, it's not actually using that, etc. But there'll be some safeguards built into it. It will be more expensive, but that's where business will go. And those companies will support themselves off of those feeds because they will have a significant revenue stream coming in from the people that are using the tools. And maybe it's on some sort of, graduated scale that, depending on how many queries you're running or how much, processing time or whatever, like AWS, right? It's just going to be another version of AWS, but for AI. Yeah. And that's going to be the enterprise version. And then you're going to have that personal stuff that's for the market, right? Direct to the consumer. Yeah. But I think where you're going with what you're talking about now, the actual usefulness of the stuff that's going to be that enterprise version, right? That's going to be the one that companies can use. And I think that's really what's going to drive the adoption because, like we both run production companies and studios, right? Yeah. So, somebody comes in and records an audiobook. It'd be great if I could take 30 hours of audio and go, can you do the rough edit for me, which is just go in and remove all the duplication and pick the better one and just give me a rough cut of everything once it's done. That's literally just taking out some spaces, breaking up chapters, and taking out duplicated sentences where they've reread something, a couple of times to get it right. That took me 90 hours to do on a 30-hour recording. And so if an AI could do that in 10 minutes or less and save me all of that time, and it's still not fundamentally doing anything, it's just literally finding, oh, this is a duplicate of that, I'm going to take it out.
And then there's tools out there, isn't it? You've used Opus before and things like that, or tried it.
I use Opus clips and
but
stuff,
that's slightly different. It's not the pre-edit. But I actually tried with Codex to get it to write me a pre-editor.
Yeah.
And with using FFmpeg and a few other tools, open source tools, and I got somewhere, but it was a long way from where it was useful. But I just wanted to test it.
Just to be clear, there is a site somewhere that says that they do that, particularly for like audiobooks and stuff.
Yeah.
But the point is, do you know what I mean? Those sorts of tools are actually useful and deliver something, as opposed to the consumer version, which is, I don't want to say it's not useful, but it's not useful in an enterprise kind of way.
Yeah.
Well, I just got some notes here. When we were talking about this, the multi-agent from Anthropic. Okay, so these are the things that it's sort of been building. It's built a whole entire C compiler from scratch. It's compiled a Linux kernel. QEMU, it's even FFmpeg, right?
Yeah. FFmpeg, it's open source software.
It's debugging independently. It's mixing fixes. No babysitting. It's just getting on with it. Yeah. Which is it's a different world.
Was it Anthropic that also did the Cobol this week and IBM share price?
10%.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about that. Actually, it's on my list. So Cobol.
Sorry.
Yeah, no. But it's a great segue. Cobol was really interesting because here's a very, very old. I mean. So most COBOL,
60s or 50s?
Yeah, 50s and 60s. Most COBOL programmers kind of look a bit like us, actually, right? Old gits in their 50s and 60s, right? They get paid a fortune, by the way. These I'm going to say guys because it really is mostly guys.
There's a handful of them still going.
Yeah, so handful still going. Get paid enormous amounts of money to go into old banks and sort out their back end legacy systems, right? And essentially, overnight, Anthropic just killed their job, basically. Produce a system that can do everything you need to do in our own COBOL, sort everything else out you need to do, migrate it from COBOL into whatever it needs to be in the future.
From Fortran.
Yeah. And so there's a bunch of old crusties like us sitting around scratching heads going, damn it, like this AI stuff,
Most of the guys I know that do that are desperate to retire.
Yeah. And
they literally don't want to do it anymore. And they're like, they throw so much money at us that we have to do it. And they literally don't want to do it, so they'll be happy.
They will be. The funny thing about it, though, when I heard about the COBOL thing, I thought, well, okay, and so COBOL is a kind of niche edge case, isn't it? In terms of the programming board. But how long is it till we wake up one morning and hear basically the same story for Python?
Yeah.
Right. And
everything.
Everything's changed then, hasn't it?
Yeah.
That to me, if you've done it for COBOL, it's really not that far away, is it? Till we hear that.
Well, surely it should be able to do Python already.
Yeah.
Well, but to the extent where you can just say Python's not done, we don't need Python programmers anymore. The computers can just do it, and it's better.
Well, I think the reason that the COBOL one's so interesting is because I think it can do a lot of the modern programming languages well already, particularly PHP and Python, particularly. But I think the thing with COBOL is no one touched it because it was such an edge case.
Yeah.
And IBM still has the market on it, doesn't it? Or the copyright to it.
Yeah.
Was it like their share price went down 10%?
10%,
at least 10%. Yeah. I mean, I didn't watch it on day 2 and day 3 where it continued to go, but it certainly took a hit. Yeah.
But I think you mentioned this before, that a lot of SaaS companies are going to be sort of quite edgy now because you're going to be able to, and you say this almost every episode. This is as good, as bad as it's going to be. So people are going to be able to write solutions that they're paying fortunes for quite easily. And I know you don't have the security, and big companies like to work with big companies, so there is that. But there is some really specific software stuff that's you're going to be able to do yourself.
There's always this case, isn't it, where over time it takes for companies to adopt stuff always takes longer than the technology
sometimes
in terms of the way technology develops. And that's just the nature of business and security and doing things safely and all that. I mean, an extreme example of this is I once had the pleasure to go on a nuclear submarine in Devonport Dockyard in Plymouth. It was a V class, and I was very excited about it. So I thought it's going to be state of the art stuff, you know. And I got down there, and it was all just switches and dials and stuff because it's legacy, because it's reliable, right? There weren't anything electronic on there, and also electronics easier to detect, you know, a signal from. But you know, it was robust, and I think for a lot of companies is why they're running COBOL still, because they're too afraid to migrate from it. So I think in one respect things happen very quickly, and in another respect, you know, businesses change a little bit slower than that. But
the bigger the slower.
But the point is, you can see then things coming, and you know that the change is happening, and it will eventually get there. So let's talk a little bit. We mentioned the adverts earlier, and they've been sort of amusing me for a couple of weeks now. I mean, obviously a couple of weeks ago we had the OpenAI sort of spat between Anthropic, where Anthropic basically put out an advert sort of taking the mickey out of OpenAI, saying, you know, you'll be chatting to, you know, your mum or something, and then the next minute it will be sort of, you know, selling a kind of, you know, cougar ads or something. You know, it was sort of, and it was done, very funny, done very well, and I thought, yeah, good on you for that. That's quite good. I like that. And then the Super Bowl happened, and I think this sort of starts off as a funny conversation, but actually there's a serious undertone to this, which I want to dig into afterwards. But you know, the ads at the Super Bowl basically rolled out. I think there was, let me get this right, there was one from Google, essentially, which was about a child and his mum, and they've arrived at their new house, you know, and it's all a bit sad because they obviously didn't want to leave for whatever reason, and all this stuff just piled up in a big pile, you know, and they're trying to, rather than sort of working with the child and helping him unpack and sharing that moment, she whips out her phone, jumps onto Gemini, you know, takes a picture of the stuff, and then asks Gemini to imagine what it would look like in the house and shows it to him. And, okay, so on the surface you go, well, then that's quite nice, is it? You know, it's sort of helping the child come to terms with this new situation. So yeah, so basically it all, you know, kicked off online, and Google got quite a backlash about this. It was a bit, there was an ad last year actually, which was similar, where I can't remember who it was now, it might have been Microsoft, but it was basically a Christmas thing, and they got the child to write you know, a letter to Santa or a poem or something, and they used, you know, AI to do it. And again, people are like, well, you know, this is not, we don't want to replace childhood with AI, basically. So that was one. Okay.
Remember the Pepsi advert as well.
So then there's another advert that runs out in the Super Bowl as well. But bear in mind how much money these companies are paying for this, right? And, you know,
millions for that one spot.
I mean, enormous amounts of money, and it's, you know, so the Ring doorbell advert. Okay, so basically the scenario in this advert is there's a lost dog in the neighbourhood, right? And through the Ring doorbell network, through the surveillance network of the Ring doorbell, they're able to track down this lost dog and, you know, return it successfully to its owner. You know, in the marketing meeting when they had this, obviously the Ring guys, oh, this is great, you know, we're going to find this poor lost dog, it's been wonderful, everyone's going to be delighted. The reaction online was kind of like, you what? You're surveilling everything? You mean you can track everyone in the neighbourhood? You mean my doorbell is part of that tracking system, and you didn't tell me? You can just turn it on and do that whenever you feel like it. Backlash. Yeah. I think the Ring's doorbell stock price took a dip, and they quickly started rolling it back. They went into full emergency PR mode. Yeah. They had to put out statements saying, no, okay, we're going to turn off this. You know, you're, instead of it being automatically on, you'll have to elect to have it switched on yourself. You know, it won't just be on by default, because I think it was on by default basically. Yeah. And of course the point was that, you know, if you replace a dog with a person or something else, or someone that ICE is after, or whatever, you know, this just becomes a really malicious tool. So, so that was that. So again, so Ring spent a lot of money.
But people do realise that they'll be able to do that anyway, even if they turn it off, right? Like law enforcement and the government will be able to do that anyway. So it makes no difference.
I think people don't realise it. That's part of the problem, isn't it? You know, but I think after the Super Bowl advert, they do realise it.
Yeah, that is a known goal, isn't it?
Yeah, and it'd be interesting to see, like, you know, what, in about 6 months' time or a year's time, what the Ring doorbell sales profile looks like. Whether after this it takes a little bit of a dip.
Yeah, I don't think it'll make any difference.
Don't you? I hate being recorded without my, like, I just don't like it. So I've resisted getting a Ring doorbell for that very reason. But that just kind of highlights it to me that it's even worse than I thought in a way. But
okay, so
I'm a fan. I quite like the Ring doorbell and the sort of.
I know.
I don't know.
Yeah, I know. I'm behind the curve on this. I know my family members have them and they love them.
I saw a really funny sketch a few years ago. A comedian I mean, back in the day, back in the 80s, people would just come and knock on your door, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
And these days, so the comedian sketch was basically, the family is sitting around and there's a ring on the door, and everyone's, who's that? Who's ringing the door? It's kind of like there's panic. Like no one ring. People always text first now.
They're all looking at the phone to
Who
see
just
who
comes
it
and
is.
knocks on your door? Yeah. It's just. But look, so there was one other advert as well that ran, and this was an Amazon advert. I forget the name of the actor now. I think it might be Chris Hemsworth from memory. Anyway, don't shoot me if I'm wrong. But essentially, the advert was AI going bad. Right, and so in this advert, he's going around and like the garage door's coming down on him, or the hot tub's getting too hot, or AI's gone a bit rogue. Now this is like a fever dream that he's having, so it's not supposedly actually happening. But again, people just kind of went, yeah, okay, even though it's supposed to be tongue in cheek and satiring people's worries about AI, also it could happen. You're just highlighting the possibilities. Yeah. So again, I think it just didn't land. So, but it got me thinking the sort of bigger picture, which is what I wanted to pick up with you guys on. Really, was this that AI? I think we're in a bubble, right? We talk about AI endlessly. We're in groups. We're quite deep in the weeds on it. We're nerdy about it. We have our views, but out in the general public, people's perception of AI is probably very different. And I think these adverts kind of serve to show that there maybe isn't that much fondness for this stuff, and that people do see it as a threat and a problem in many instances. And I just wonder, as we go forward, as this stuff does become more pervasive in society and more ubiquitous everywhere you are, everything integrated into everything, that we end up in a place where you could almost have a bit like the Luddites, sort of back in the turn of the 19th century, where they're very anti-technology. So you get this kind of anti-AI thing starting. But really building. I mean, at the moment, I think it's probably there, but fairly low level.
There was a protest outside a data center in America last week, wasn't there?
Was there? Yeah.
Yeah. So that Luddite thing is been around. There's people are worried about their jobs, basically, aren't they? Ultimately,
I think this starts to build over time, and I think those adverts in a way just kind of highlight that people aren't that excited. I think the tech companies are very excited about this stuff, and they have this vision for how people should live their lives. I'm not sure that humanity entirely agrees with them, and at some point there's going to be quite a pushback.
Yeah, well, I think there's two or three points there. One of the big points is you've got a handful of people who are more powerful than governments. Eventually. Yep. The people like OpenAI and Anthropic, the leaders of these companies are going to be they're huge.
Elon.
Yeah. So that doesn't feel a comfortable place for the world to be. Mass job loss and sort of I've got experiences of losing out on work already because I haven't responded to someone who says, "Oh, don't worry, I got OpenAI to do it." Like a Christmas card design, little things, but they are starting to build, and I think. Just that taps into that sort of whether some of it is conspiracy theory or not, but it taps into that global sort of I'm losing control to something that's going to not only take my job but is also going to be able to dictate how the world is run. We talked about it in cars, or we talked about it with lots of policies. 15-minute cities, all these things. There's a feeling that that's getting away from us, and AI is going to have a big part in that.
Yeah, and I think. You touched on globalization, and I think what bothers most people about it, I think now, is the fact that I think it used to be maybe 100 years ago, your local government and even your country's government had some control.
Yeah.
Right? So when you elected somebody, those people actually had control to make decisions that could impact your life.
Yeah.
Now that's not the case. You can't. And this was the whole argument behind Brexit. And let's not get into Brexit.
No.
But the idea behind it is that here, you're in the Mumbles, right? You've got a local council here, right? The local council can pass any regulation they want.
Yeah.
But EU law is going to supersede that on a lot of areas. So let's say you decide to manufacture we come up with some new camera design or some new tripod design or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And it's like, fine, you can design it to the UK requirements, which are the only UK requirements. That's fine. But the problem is that you can't sell it anywhere else because all the regulations in other places are different.
Yeah.
So if you want to sell it in Europe, you have to build it to the EU regulations, whether you want to or not.
Yeah.
And so it's probably not the best example, but it sort of is what I mean. So we've now lost control of our local area because we now have a global market.
Yeah.
And that's for jobs, that's competition for manufacturing, that's everything.
Yeah.
And so I think that's what it's getting to is people are, it's that feeling of lost control, and it's this whole globalization thing. And the AI is only making, and technology is only making that worse.
I think AI can very quickly as well become the kind of the whipping boy, right? Because when people start losing their jobs, I think that's the moment really.
And it's happening.
I mean, it's happening on a small scale at the moment to some degree. But if we see mass job losses, let's say we see 20% of the workforce go, right? Suddenly you've got 20% unemployment in a country. That's unheralded, in sort of in the modern era. If we suddenly end up in a place like that, AI very quickly becomes, the devil, basically, this thing that's basically destroying everyone's lives, it's causing social unrest, you'd be having riots, you'd have all sorts of things going on. And at that point, then there's a bit of a reckoning, isn't there? Because as a society, we have to decide what we do with this thing.
Yeah.
Because it's one thing in the internet which gives everyone, there's a very big difference that people often don't fully understand. The internet, sure, that distributed information to everyone, but this puts intelligence potentially in everything. And like you say, decision making now is being taken by a machine, not a human, and you could be on the wrong end of that decision. That starts to feel very uncomfortable, right? At least with a human on the other end of the wrong decision, you can think, well, I'm going to go back and complain about this, and there's some course of action. But suddenly if an algorithm is just deciding that, no, you don't get that, or you don't get this, or you don't get that opportunity, or you feel like you've been discriminated against for some reason because of an algorithm, I think people will start to fight back against that much harder than, say, fighting back against humans in some respects. So it's because it's very easy to demonize as a thing, right? Because it's not human, so it becomes easier to do that. So it's going to be very interesting to see, I think, how this plays out, and be interesting to look at the ads next year at the Super Bowl, whether the AI companies are kind of all in on it and try again, or whether they just kind of go, we're just going to leave it.
I think they'll change tack. I think you start to see. I think it was Chevrolet did a old American value style advert recently, and it the car that lasted for 30 years, and they went back to their childhood home where they raised a kid, and it was a really emotional, well done advert. All, not a single bit of motion graphics in it, no AI, and the praise it got by just across the board. Because that is going to be the narrative, that a lot of people are going to lean into, the authentic, the non-digital,
Well, there's a show I've just watched on the BBC for viewers in the UK. Definitely check this one out. It's called Small Profits. It's a wonderful little show. And there's some animation in it for some of the characters, and they use stop motion. And they could have used AI very easily, right? And it would probably been okay. But actually, the stop motion was delightful. Yeah, absolutely. So there's definitely that sort of craft element to this thing. I still can't quite believe the Coke advert that came out this Christmas. To me that's just unbelievable. And it's just, but also when their strap line is always the real thing or something, isn't it? It's just like, and you're using AI, that's just.
So can I drop a bomb in here? So the one thing that we haven't really talked about, but that did just come to mind, because we're talking about 20% job losses, right? That's what made me think about this. The knock-on effect of that, though, is you've got 20% reduction in tax income for the government. And those job losses are going to have massive impacts on the amount of money that governments have to operate. And I know that this is a huge topic of discussion within government agencies and within governments around the world, is trying to understand, how do you tax that? Or how do you get that money back from the employees that are lost? So I think we should dedicate an entire show to this, maybe later, and maybe get somebody else on with us who's like an economist who's maybe at the front edge of this. And I have some contacts in Cambridge and Oxford, so maybe we can get somebody who has thought seriously about this. But the only thing I can see happening is that there is going to have to become some sort of a tax that goes along with the usage of AI
Yeah.
that would equate to an employee in a business.
Yeah.
And so I don't know how you do that calculation because AI is so much more capable than a single employee. And I don't understand the metrics there to say, well, if you're using AI, that's equivalent to 10 employees. So therefore, the average wage for these 10 employees would be X. And therefore, you have to pay things like national
20% of
insurance or
100
whatever,
grand.
right? Like, and you've got to pay the
Yeah.
employment taxes that you would pay for those people because because you're using that instead of people.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that situation will actually push back on AI and people will end up using humans instead, because actually it will cost less at that point to use a human than it would
Yeah.
for AI. And then you really only use AI for very specific, very high-end purposes to do very limited tasks. I don't know.
Do you think? I mean, one thing that, and I don't know how you would do it actually, but because it'd be hard to get them to pay the money. But do you think rather than going to the employers, you just go straight to the AI companies? You go to Elon and say, look, you're responsible for 20% job losses. There's a drop in revenue. You need to pay the government X.
Maybe.
And
To operate,
effectively fine them or put a levy on them for,
Maybe.
if you're going to roll these tools out, they're going to wipe out all these jobs, then, you need to pick up the lost government revenue that we were going to get.
Maybe.
Because you've caused that to happen.
And then you get to a socialist utopia of universal credit.
Well, and I think that's definitely an episode we should have.
But that's how that's the only way you could pay for
Yeah.
it, because otherwise there's no money to pay for it.
Yeah.
And knowing how governments work and how they think, I suspect there would be an ulterior motive to that, because as well, the flip side of that is if you do go to the AI companies, that's much easier, right? And it becomes we're just going to tax the shit out of them, right? And that makes it easier. But then that also now means that you don't need such a big tax department in your government, which then puts tens of thousands of people out of jobs because you don't need them to do it. You go to something like, if you were going to reorganize the system today, you would probably say, look, there's a flat tax. It's X percent, whatever that is, 10%, 15%, whatever, on your income. That's it. Everybody pays the same tax. There are no deductions. You don't get any write-offs. There's no complications. You take 70,000 pages of tax law down to 5.
Yeah.
It becomes very simple. But the knock-on effect of that, again, is these massive tax organizations no longer needed. The cost to the government, no longer needed. The entire businesses that run around tax, no longer needed. And no government is actually going to make that decision because they don't want to be the ones to put all those people out of work.
Yeah.
So you've got this weird thing, because when you're in government, you have to make decisions around things like that. So even though something seems like the right thing to do and it's much more efficient and it's easier, that wipes out careers for
and also you're not
so
going to
many
be no
people.
government's going to be popular doing that.
And they're not going to do it because they're politicians, and they're like, I'm not going to be the one to do that.
Yeah.
Big tech are going to have to help find the answer, I think, because they need society to continue and to be stable, right? For them to continue to be successful as a business, right? Microsoft, OpenAI, X, all these companies. It's no use to them if there's a complete and utter societal meltdown. That damages their business enormously. So, and they want to obviously continue where they are at the top of the pile, presumably. So they should be, or ought to be, incentivized to try and find and help solutions. But I think, it'd be interesting to come back in 200 years, wouldn't it? Because you sort of think the way society functions in the model probably has to look fundamentally different than what it does now.
And don't forget, this is going. A lot of these job losses are going to be in the knowledge industry. They're not. In previous revolutions and big leaps, it was often the working class or the that lost out because of improvements in equipment or technology. Whereas this is actually, the knowledge people that are going to go. Junior lawyers and junior doctors, junior creatives. It's going to have a huge impact. It's going to be interesting to see how that.
It's already happening in PR and stuff. And I've talked about my friend who runs a PR company, and she had said in the beginning when I talked to her, very early in my own podcast when I talked to her, she was of the opinion that AI couldn't replace it. It's a very human-driven business, and it's a lot driven on relationships with journalists and all sorts of stuff. And then I talked to her recently, and her opinion on that had changed, and she was like, yeah, we just got rid of 14 interns because we didn't need them.
Yeah.
And she's like, it was actually more trouble dealing with the interns than it was worth for the business.
Yeah.
And my people who were on the team could just do the work using AI.
Yeah.
And the difficulty, and again, we've said this almost every episode, is for some industries, like going through being a junior lawyer, for example, it can take 10, 15 years before you get to it. But if you're not doing that process anymore, you're never going to get the seniors coming through in 10
Well,
years.
I suppose the
But
end
then
game.
you don't need them in
The end
10.
game is you don't need them in 10 years because the systems are so good that you don't need them either.
And then,
Well, exactly. But this is the thing. So we're on a rolling clock.
so
that
20% of job losses seems kind of quite conservative then, it might be...
Because there's always this assumption, isn't there, that, but you'll still need the senior, really, clever, smart, important people. Actually, no. That goes eventually as well,
And the other one, and we may have even talked about this last time, the whole thing with radiology, right? Is that because AI, the scans, the analysis by machine learning or AI of the scans is more accurate now than it is having a human do it, and it's faster.
Yeah.
So everybody was like, oh my God, there's going to be no more radiologists. Actually, they need more radiologists than ever because they need to deal with the volume of people coming through, because now every doctor is sending people to radiology because the scans are more accurate and they're faster. So it's like, oh, well, we can just do as many scans as we want now. So they now have to physically deal with the people coming through the pipeline, which only humans can do that part of the process.
Yeah.
And so they need more radiologists than ever. So they've now got more radiologist training than they've ever had before because they need them. So I kind of...
There's new opportunities.
Well,
you can see where some of the new opportunities come
the
from.
robots arrive. But I saw Elon actually talking about the Optimus robot the other day, and he was sort of saying, and this is Elon, of course, right? And his timings are always wild. But he's basically sitting there saying, look, in his not too distant future, which is probably next week, but in the not too distant future, you'll have this robot in your house, the Optimus robot, that people will be able to afford and will be available. And it will be the best doctor you've ever met. It will be the best lawyer you've ever met. It will be the best surgeon you've ever met. It will be able to do everything that you need. That system, and it will have agency, and it will be able to physically, move around and do things as well. So, and I don't think that's happening anytime soon. But it probably is in 100 years. And 100 years is not is only one life, human life generation really. So it's, I think that, when we get to that stage, all the interns, all the extra people that we might say, oh, we've got more people coming through now, so we need more. That does go away eventually, And so, as a society, starting to work out what that world looks like and how you start building towards it, I think the countries that get that right will be okay. I think the problem's really going to come in that the powerhouses here are in America and China. So if you're the American government and you're saying to Elon Musk, hey, you need to give us X billion pounds a year to meet up the kind of, the government shortfalls because you've wiped out all our income, they might do it. But if the UK government say that to Elon, to say, nothing, you're not America, so, that's your problem.
Exactly.
Sue me. Do you know what I mean? How are you going to get the money? So basically any country that's at, not America is probably going to have a real problem trying to access that money, because they're not going to start giving. Elon's not going to start giving out money to Iceland and Brazil. Do you know what I mean? It's just not going to happen, is it? He's not going to cover the whole world.
Well, again, but this gets back to the whole reorganizing how the tax system works and everything else globally, because now you're in a global market that you've never been in, and so the laws aren't really designed or set up. The cynical side of us would say that they're designed that way on purpose. So that only people with a certain very high level of knowledge understand how they work and know where the loopholes are. But those loopholes are designed for the people with money to be able to continue to have money. And, this is why, like, if you want to be rich, if you're from a poor background and you want to be rich, there's kind of levels to the game, right? The first level is you got to get a job. The next level is you then have to be able to make enough money that you can afford an accountant. Right, and then that accountant opens up a whole new level of managing your money and understanding how to do things. But you just need an accountant, so you get to that level as soon as possible. But then you work with an accountant for a few years. you've got that accountant, but then you need a wealth manager because that's a very different skill. So the accountant's dealing with cash flow and how you're managing your credit and all that sort of stuff, whereas then you're building up a little bit of pot of money, and then you go to a wealth manager, and there's levels to this game.
Yeah.
And I think all of the loopholes and all of the the company director stuff and all of that for ages was all built around that wealth manager accountant sort of knowledge level.
Model, yeah.
And again, that's all coming out in the open. And so now you're getting tools that can give you that advice, and the AI tools are going to be able to. We're going to have a finance and an AI, an accounting trained AI that will come out that will be able to do all that stuff for you. It'll do. I don't understand why AI doesn't do bookkeeping for everybody already. Anyway, it's pretty simple.
Go back to your comment earlier about SaaS. It's AI becomes the software, right? I mean, basically, and that a lot of software that we use today will go away. It will be replaced with AI systems. It will just do the thing you need, basically, and give you the information
on the fly.
On the fly. This is what I need. You provide it.
100%, yeah. I mean, my eyes opened to this a little bit. I know I've been playing around with some Codex stuff, but I've got a family member that lives in Portugal, and he often invites people to do this. He sends around a spreadsheet of booking days and stuff. So I spent a couple of hours and just made him an online tool with a calendar, and it pulls in all his favourite football teams' games into the calendar, all the opening times of the local attractions. It has a mini golf leaderboard for whoever goes and visits, and the reviews.
Right, okay.
I mean, Codex did it all.
Yeah.
Like, it found even asked me, do you want to put in affiliate deals? Like, it is like what it can do. I mean, so if you take that to your own personal finances, I've seen people online saying they've downloaded a few years worth of their bank statements and got some of their agents to do cancellations on subscriptions they don't need. It tells them where they're wasting money, tells them where they need to be spending more, spending less, and you spend 14% on eating out at Greg's this month, all that kind of thing. But giving them really nice reports and suggestions.
I don't need to know how much I spend.
Only 14%. That's right. We can do better than that.
My wife tells me every day. Did you go to Costa? You went to Costa again?
We should do a Greg's leaderboard, shouldn't we? Number one in Swansea.
But you're right. I mean, I can see, and to take your point that you mentioned earlier, Alan, like building specialized tools. Like, I've never been able to find a tool. So for those of you who don't know, I run a small studio, video studio. We have an audio room and we have a video room. So we have two spaces that we need to manage and can book time in. Yeah. And I've not been able to find anything online that accommodates the 2-room model in the way I want to do it, that's tied into my CRM tool so I can keep track of everybody. So when somebody books for 3 hours of a session and maybe they want to split it into 2, like just keeping track of all that stuff in a nice way. And I could very much see where I could probably, if I were so inclined, I could probably spend a weekend getting it to build a simple CRM tool with a web page interface where people could go in and interface with my Google Calendar or create a calendar where people could go, they could book what they want, and it connects to our Stripe account so people can just go and book and pay online. And I'm sure it would do that, and it would build all the specialized stuff around video studios and the sorts of work that we do around editing and planning and production and all the other stuff that we need. I'm sure I could do that. And I don't need a Notion or a Hootsuite or any of those because they don't do exactly what I need, but I could probably just make something. And if I said, I want it to be sort of like this, but here's what I specifically need it to do, I'm sure I could just build my own.
Oh, you would be able to,
easily.
Very easily, I've had a lot of fun.
Or I can pay someone to do it.
But a lot of, don't pay them, do you? For sure. I mean, I've had a lot of fun building, very bespoke apps, I suppose, for very specific tasks that, you would never, no company's ever going to make that app. Do you know what I mean? But think actually there's a very sort of unique workflow or thing that I do, and this can just do it. And then you can set up like a shortcut, like a trigger word. You can just say the word to the thing, and then it just gets on and does it. It knows exactly what it's doing.
Apps I use every day. Amazing.
Do you think about for us, right? Like, you think you get a new client, and it's like, here's the new client, and it can go and create all of your directory structure that you need for your filming and your recording. It can go and do that automatically. It creates a customer record. It then can go in and say, yes, I've created all the directory structure. It ticks that off the list of to-dos.
Yeah.
You know, it creates all of your release forms that you need, right? Like you start putting people's names in, it creates all the forms for you. Like you don't have to go and do that. There's the call sheet, like everything, right? It can send your email, hey, welcome to the studio, glad you booked a session. Like all that stuff, it can just do automatically.
Yeah.
And again, this gets back around to agents, right? So that's more of an agent kind of thing, but it's like having someone on your team who can just go and, but I just go, thanks very much, or they've booked through the website and it just all happens.
Yeah.
And then when it comes to the data filming, it's like, right, okay, we filmed the thing and all I do is upload the video files and then it picks it up.
Yeah.
And I do know a guy who has a very complicated AI system that goes and actually processes all the videos and everything, cuts it into social clips, gets everything together, like sends all the emails and everything. And he's already built that on the back end.
He did it himself, did he?
Yeah, he did it himself. So, I mean, he can produce an entire show and get the social clips out in like 4 minutes after the recording's finished.
Yeah, I was using a tool the other day. I did a podcast, a different podcast the other day, and I was a guest on it. I was a guest on it. It wasn't my podcast. But
I feel dirty.
It's called The Chief Uncensored. I did post it in the group actually, but the chap who set that up for me to do it, he sent me the full video at the end, and I can't remember the name of the tool now. I'll have to look it up. But I popped it into this AI tool, and it just chopped the whole thing up into sort of 30-second, 60-second clips.
It's not Opus, was it?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
This one?
Yeah, Opus. Yeah.
Opus, yeah. I use
and,
Opus,
it's free, and I just go, there you go. There is a paid version. I'm sure it does something else, but
I pay for it.
But I mean, I was impressed by it. It was some interesting, and it found some really good little sound
So what we do is I use Opus. So I get a rough cut of a video.
Yeah.
I send it to the client, and I upload it to Opus, and I have Opus run its algorithm on it. It comes back. I say, tell me the ones that you want. They choose the ones they want, and then I go cut them manually from the actual video because it looks a lot better.
Yeah.
But it's that decision-making process of just identifying what are the interesting or potentially interesting bits of the conversation that Opus has actually got really good at. And it's got even better lately because it now will take different segments and pull them together.
Yeah.
Which it didn't used to do. It used to be a continuous bit, but now it's actually starting to edit, which is also quite interesting. So it's starting to pull stuff, because I did that the other day and I was like, oh, wait a minute.
Well,
that's not.
If anyone from Opus is listening and they want to sponsor the show.
Yeah, if they want to sponsor,
we're here for you.
If they want to sponsor, we're here.
And this episode is not sponsored by Opus.
No.
But there we are. So I've got one more topic I want to throw out there today as well. If you've got any others, Ben, or...
No, I mean, I know we talk about sometimes at the beginning about what's impressed us with AI recently, and mine was just Codex and one GPT that someone else has done for learning. I'm redoing some of my drone exams, and the way that helped me learn was just off the scale. I can't remember what it was called, but I'll bring that up next time.
Okay.
But let's go on to
So the last one for me was just Amazon put out a statement this week saying that they'd had over 600 firewall breaches by AI, cybersecurity breaches by AIs in like the past week or something, and it just got me thinking that we're probably just now going to enter this new world, aren't we, where AI is both the problem and probably the solution as well. You're going to have this kind of AI's fighting AI wars, basically. One's trying to get in, the other one's trying to stop it. And I just started working out how, who wins actually. Is it the kids sitting in their bedrooms with the AI tools creating stuff, or is it the big tech companies trying to build the barrier?
But I think we as consumers of those platforms win ultimately because of that battle.
Yeah.
So I saw another article where somebody was talking about they set, I don't know if it was OpenClaw or something, but they set the agent off against their system and it found 500 vulnerabilities.
It was on a massive SaaS, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. It was.
Which had a whole department for looking for bugs.
It was actually the cybersecurity guy who posted it, right? And he's like, I'm out of a job because he's like, I have a whole team of people. Maybe it was on X or something. I think
I saw it as well. Yeah, but they're saying like that there's a whole industry around this that hadn't found these 20-year-old problems on this major software.
Yeah, and it's like the system just went and got it.
Yeah.
So I think it's good for us.
Got to trust your AI as well. That's the trouble.
And it's but I think so. But I also think that there's a lot of stuff that probably proper hackers have known about for years and years and years.
Yeah.
And so they've been able to get into any system because a lot of this stuff is so low level that nobody even knew about it. But now the AI is surfacing stuff that I think only a very high level, the very highest level security person would know and be able to find. It's now bringing that level of knowledge to everybody.
Yeah.
But this is the risk. It's doing it across every industry. And I think I mentioned yesterday when we were talking while I was waiting for the train, or I left a message, but knowledge used to be expensive. It's not expensive anymore.
Yeah.
It has no value anymore.
No, exactly.
And so everybody can have access to it, good and bad.
Anyone whose business is built on selling knowledge is in trouble, I think.
100%.
And in a way, that's been true for a while, but AI has just absolutely amplified that and made it much more accessible and easier to. Because you can have accessibility to, say, a load of law books, but you yourself need a certain capability and knowledge to understand and actually then use that in a meaningful way and how to apply it. But the AI can do that now, so it takes away that friction. It basically becomes the answer engine that can. You've got the problem, you described that. It gives you the answer you need. So it's interesting, isn't it?
And even my sister-in-law, who's a lawyer, and my brother-in-law, who's a lawyer as well, he's like, they're losing the industry, not them specifically, but the industry is losing a lot of the low-level jobs that used to fund what they did. Same with creative businesses, right? Like, you don't need a lawyer. We don't need a lawyer to help us write a release form.
No.
Right? Like, AI can do that, and we can read that and go, yes, that correct,
covers
right? That covers everything we want to cover.
Yeah.
Or you can give it a contract and say, what's in this contract? Is there anything unusual in this contract? Am I missing something? And it will just come back and tell you. And it's pretty simple to do those sorts of things. But that was the bread and butter of a lot of corporate lawyers and stuff like that. Yes, there's still a need for the high end. You're talking about civil cases and all sorts of complex things. But those people whose bread and butter was just generating those sorts of documents and working on agreements and standard business contracts and all that sort of stuff, that's all going away.
Yeah. But take what we do, video production. 10 years ago, we used to make quite a significant amount of revenue doing captions. We used to do a lot of long form courses, 6-7 month projects that then would have 15, 20, 30 hours of captioning to do, and DVD production. It wasn't work I enjoyed doing, but it was a source of revenue.
Yeah.
And so you would never dream of, still now, maybe take me a couple of hours to do some of that, to check it, to realign it, but a huge amount of that work's gone away.
We were complaining, my business partner and I the other day, were complaining about the fact that somebody wanted captions on their video and it was going to take us like a half an hour to go through an hour and a half long video and check the captions, not just put them in, just check and make sure that all the words were correct and that they were spelled in the right way. And it was like...
Well, captions still, particularly live ones, are often wrong, aren't they? It misunderstands the word and says something slightly different.
But once upon a time,
this is to your point, right?
Days.
It was like, we were just like, do we even want to do this?
We actually had to listen to it and type it out. There was no tool to auto...
translation and all that stuff. Now you throw it in a tool, like all the major editing tools have it now.
Of course.
But you do your video, you put it in, you get your final edit done, and then you literally click a button and it adds all your subtitles and everything to all of it. We'll generate a subtitle file if you want to upload it to YouTube or whatever, and then off you go. And it's it needs some checking, but that's 1/10 of the time.
I know. Yeah.
And it's ridiculous. It's great though at the same time.
Yeah.
But
it's
this. This is why we have this show, right? Because we talk about this all the time, and it's why I started my show. Is we are going to have to figure out, we as a society and a world are going to have to figure out how we can use this and how we're going to get along afterwards and what that means. And this is we can talk about this forever.
Yeah.
Which is why it's a great topic.
Well, it's fun, isn't it? Well, there we are. Well, I think we are probably however coming to the end of this particular episode.
Talked about it forever.
Well, there we are. So I'll just a couple of things just to update listeners on. The website for AI.org behind this podcast has been updated, so please do go and check that at AI.org.com. We would love, again, to say, but we would love to hear from any listeners, far-flung places especially. That would be fantastic. And the email for that is alan@aiorg.org. So hopefully people can remember that. And we look forward to hearing from you. But I think that's probably a wrap, guys.
Yep.
Sounds good.
There we are. Till the next time. I'm sad to say next time we'll probably be back on our screens, won't we?
Yeah.
But it's been...
And a special thanks to Ben for actually coming and bringing all of his kit and lighting and everything else so that we could do this in person. So thank you very much, Ben. And anybody in the west of England needs help with video stuff, go to Ben. And if you're in the east, come to me.
Perfect.
And the north, we'll cut it in half,
Yeah, we'll both do it.
Definitely don't come to me because I don't know what any of these cameras are doing, but they look fantastic. So.
All right, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Cheers.